Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Samech Gimel. We are at the bottom of daf Samech Bet Amud Bet. And we've been talking about a variety of stories of rabbis and their wives and the learning that they do. And we're going to continue now with one of the most famous of all of the rabbis of the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, and that is I know. I hopefully Stan will be here, but yeah, it's now it's time to start. So we'll start now, and hopefully he'll have a chance to come. So we're talking today about Rabbi Akiva and his life story, and so we'll begin with the story of Rabbi Akiva, and then that will complete the story of the righteous spouses of the rabbis. And then we will continue with the next Mishnah. And again, the most important thing to remember is that Rav Rechumi, when he failed to come home on Erev Yom Kippur, as he was planning to, as he had done for all the previous years, his wife felt bad. And when she cried a tear, so the Gemara tells us that was when the floor underneath Rav Rechumi opened and collapsed, and so he fell to his death, unfortunately. And so it highlights that we have to treat each other nicely, that we need to make sure that we are kind to one another, and that when we cause each other pain and cause each other to cry, so then that is bringing damage into the world. And even though, of course, I'm sure Rechumi's wife did not want that to happen, but that was the punishment that's associated with it when you bring bad things into this world, so then they can come back and end up harming you. So we'll move on from that again to the story of Rabbi Akiva, and this is a story of a positive story of how a wife can be supportive of her husband. And of course, it's possible to be supportive in the other direction as well, even though all these stories are about men doing learning. That doesn't have to be in that direction only. All right, but in any event, picking up four lines from the bottom of Samach Bet Amud Bet, Rabbi Akiva, Ra'aya de ben Kalba Savua Hava. Rabbi Akiva began his life when he was a young man. He was a shepherd. He was a sheep herder for Ben Kalba Savua. Chazise Brate. So he happened to see, or his daughter, the Rabbi Ben Kalba Savua's daughter saw Dahavit Sinia Ma'ale, that he was very modest and had good midot, namely Rabbi Akiva had these good midot, but he didn't know any Torah. He didn't know any learning. He didn't know anything. And so as a result, but even though he didn't know anything, Amrullah, she said to him, Imiktashana lach azalt lebei rav, if I marry you, and thereby presumably she was figuring that she's going to be wealthy because her father was wealthy. If I marry you and send you to the yeshiva, will you go learn Torah and mitzvot and learn about the halacha? And he says, Amar la, absolutely I would. So they got married, and she sent him away to study Torah. So unfortunately, Shama Avua, her father, heard that what had happened and that in fact they had gotten married. Upcoming Beise, he threw her out of the house. Not a very nice thing to do, because he was so upset that she would marry somebody who was so beneath her. So Adra Hana Menechse, and he said, I'm making a vow that the person, that the daughter was not going to be able to benefit from any possessions that he had. Azal Yosef Trey Srei Shnin Bevei Rav. So now we turn back to Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva has been now in the yeshiva for 12 years. Ki Asa, when he came back, Iti Bahade Trey Srei Alfei Talmidei. He brought with him 12,000 students. he had become a very important rabbi, and the very important rabbi that that in fact would have so many students, 12,000 students. Kiasa, when he came back, Aite Bahade Trey Srei Alfe Talmid. Oh, sorry, I just read that. So Shamela Hu Sava de Amarla, as he came, he heard this older man say to his wife, Ad Kama Kamadabrat Almanut Chaim. How long are you going to live this life of as if you are a widow? Here, Stan, wonderful. How long are you going to live this life? We're just now on the top of Samach Gimel, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. We just went to the top of Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, 63a. And so the man asks Rabbi Akiva's wife, how are you going to, how long are you going to stay in this state of effective widowhood? Because Rabbi Akiva's wife had sent away Rabbi Akiva in order to go learn in the yeshiva. And so she said back to him, Amrle, if he listened to me, Yosef Trey Srei Shnei Achrine, he would go and sit in the yeshiva for another 12 years. So again, Rabbi Akiva's wife sent him away for the first 12 years, and before he even comes back, he sends him away for another 12 years. So Amar, so now Rabbi Akiva says to himself, Bershuska Avidna, I'm going to now act with my wife's permission. Hadir Azil, apparently even without going back, without even interacting with his wife, he went back and learned in yeshiva for another 12 years. And he spent another 12 years in the academy, in yeshiva. So Kiasa, now when he returned, now it's 24 years later, Aiti Bahade Esrin Va'arba Alfe Talmide. He brought back with him 24,000 students. So the first time, how many students did he have? 12,000, exactly. And now he comes back with 24,000 students. Now, it's interesting because, of course, these 24,000 students are the students that died during the time between Pesach and Shavuot. And it's interesting to think whether I know exactly. It's a lot of years to spend away from home. So in any event, the point is that he came back with all these students, and Shama Devisu, and so his wife hears that in fact he's back. So Havas Kanafka La'ape. So she went out to greet him. Amrula Shibavata. So the person who lived next to her neighbor says, She'ili Mani Lavush Kasai. Go borrow some nice clothes, meaning she didn't have very much money because her father wasn't taking care of her and her husband was away learning, so she had very little. And so, so her neighbor said, listen, why don't you borrow some nice garments? So Amra Lahu, she said to her neighbors, Yodea Tzadik Nefesh Behemto, a righteous person knows the nature of his animal. Meaning that he's going to recognize me. I don't need, and he'll recognize the goodness that I have. It doesn't, what I wear isn't what's going to matter. And of course, that is in fact the case. When she reached him, she fell on her face. And she kissed him at the ground, at the feet. And but the people who were helping Rabbi Akiva, they didn't know who this person was, and so they began to push her away. Amar lahu, Rabbi Akiva said to them, Shavkua, leave her alone. Shali v'shalachem shalahu. Everything that is mine and is yours, meaning all the Torah that we have all learned together, it all belongs to her. Shama avua to asagav rabba lamasa. So the father who had been taking away, remember the father had not allowed his daughter to benefit from any of his possessions. So apparently he heard that this great man had come. He didn't know that it was his son-in-law. He just knew that a great man had come to visit at the town. So Amar, he said, Ezel legabe, I'm going to go to him. Efsher demafer nidrai. He saw that his daughter had spent the last 24 years dedicated to her husband, notwithstanding the fact that her husband was away. So as a result, presumably he wanted to annul the vow because he saw that, in fact, the potential threat of withholding funds did not work in order to bring back his daughter to get rid of Rabbi Akiva. So Asal Lagabe, so he came to Rabbi Akiva. Amarle, Rabbi Akiva said, Adaita de Gavra Rabba midart. Did you make the vow with the intent that even if he became a great man, you meaning that the person that you, because of course, again, he still doesn't know that it's Rabbi Akiva, his son-in-law, that he's talking to. And so he says, so Amarle, afilu perak echad va'afilu halacha achad. No, if the guy even knew one halacha, one mishnah, I wouldn't have made this neder. And so Amar Le, Anahu. So Rabbi Akiva says, I am the guy. The implication is that he was matir the neder, that Rabbi Akiva was matir the neder, but the Rivash, who says that actually a person cannot be matir a neder that relates to him. This actually, I guess, can have some impact on Rosh Hashanah, which is coming up. Actually, we do Hataras Nedarim, and so when we do Hataras Nedarim, if in fact you made a vow that you need to nullify, you should make sure that none of the judges are impacted by that vow, and that way it won't. Yeah, I know. Soon we're going to have Rosh Hashanah. So soon we're going to be doing Hataras Nedarim, which is what effectively Rabbi Akiva did for his father-in-law.
We'll have the ram's horn.
Yeah, and we'll have the ram's horn too. Exactly. Nafal, that's called the shofar. So Nafal apeh v'nashke al karei. So again, his father-in-law fell on his face and kissed him on his foot, kissed Rabbi Akiva on his face, v'yav le palga mamone, and he ended up giving him half of his money. So Tosos wants to understand. I don't understand. How could the vow be nullified when in fact we have a principle that we don't allow a change in circumstances to be the cause of the nullification of a vow? It has to be that if the circumstances can't be what the changing circumstances can't be what affects it. It has to be fundamental a mistake at that time. And so Tosfos offers two answers as to how there could have been a mistake at that time. One is to say that, yes, in fact, there was a mistake at that time. Namely, what had happened already at the time that the father-in-law had made the vow. Rabbi Akiva had already said, I'm going to learn. And so because Rabbi Akiva had already said, I'm going to learn, so that in and of itself shows already there, at that moment, there were changed circumstances. It wasn't a future change. It was already in existence, that if the father-in-law had known about the fact that he was going to go to learn, so then he would have not had the vow. Alternatively, one can understand that this vow was effectively a conditional vow. And when you have and this is the top Tosfos, and when you have a conditional vow, so then the conditional vow is subject to the condition. And here the condition is that Rabbi Akiva was not learned. When Rabbi Akiva turns out to be learned, so then the vow becomes a null and void. So those are the two answers that Tosfos answers. In any event, Brate de Rabbi Akiva of the Leven Azai Hachi. So apparently the daughter of Rabbi Akiva learned from her mother and did the exact same thing with Ben Azai. That Ben Azai had wonderful midot, but hadn't done that much learning. And she married him and sent him to yeshiva. So v'hainu damrei inshi, and this is what people say: Recheli basa rechela azla. A you follows a you, meaning a daughter follows a mother. Ka'ovde ama kach ovde brata. Just as the mother does, so too does the daughter.
If the vow had the condition, would Rabbi Akiva have to annul it?
So that's a good question. I think that maybe he wouldn't, which is why it doesn't actually say that it required any annulment, because the vow was effectively conditioned on the fact that he was no longer learned, was staying as unlearned. So Brante had to ask him the question. What? He wouldn't have had to ask him the question if he had known. But remember, at the moment that he asked the question, he didn't know what the status was. So that I think that's the way I'm understanding it.
Did he go back to another shiva for another 12 years?
So I don't think he went back to the, well, I don't know whether he went back 12 years and then another 12 years. And what Mark is asking is, did he go for 36 years? I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't think he lived that long.
Yeah, he may not have. Unfortunately, Rabbi Akiva was murdered by the Romans. So, okay. Rav Yosef Rei de Rav Shadrei Avuhi Lebei Rav Lekame de Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, was sent by his father to go study in yeshiva in front of Rav Yosef. Okay, Paskule Shishne. They agreed that the guy was going to study for 3 years. So Kihava Tlashani, after 3 years came, the guy came back. Mata Male Yoma the Kippura. He came back on the night before Yom Kippur. Amar Ezel v'achazina le'inshevesi. I want to go see my family. And in particular, the assumption is that he was married and that he wanted to go see his wife. Shama avuhi. His father heard him. Shakel mana naf v'nafekla. Lape. He took a utensil, and we take a look at Rashi. Shakel mana kli zayin, weapons of war. Like he's going to battle. His father took out weapons in order to battle his son. Amarle, and he said to his son, Zonaschan is karta. You are remembering your harlot, meaning you're so desirous of relations that you're coming back in after 3 years instead of after 6 years. So and alternatively, Iki da Amri, others say, no, Amar Le, he said to him, Yonazchaz is karta, you've remembered your dove, and so that the idea being suggested here that the dove is very faithful, and so the point being that you're acting in a very faithful way, but maybe you should still go to yeshiva. You would agree to be in yeshiva for 6 years, so. Itrid, they were discussing and arguing about it. Below mar ipsik, below mar ipsik, and neither of them, Rashi explains, Itrid ba'osa mariba. They were busy with this argument, and then the fourth line of Rashi in the last of the wide lines, lo mar ipsik, lo achlu seudas yom kippurim shemafsikin ba'achila. They didn't even have a chance. They were so upset at one another that they didn't have a chance to eat the meal before Lahitanot, before the fast. And because, as Rashi notes, Seuda Achrona Shel Erev Tisha B'Av B'Yom Kippurim Kari Seuda Hamafseket Shemafsikin Ba B'Maseches Tanis. Okay, that's how we end the.
They had sukkah during the holidays.
Did they have a sukkah? Yes. When it was sukkahs, there was time for sukkahs, but that comes after Yom Kippur. So they came back. He came back on Erev Yom Kippur. And it didn't, and they got into this argument and didn't have a chance to eat the meal before Yom Kippur. So they were extra hungry that Yom Kippur. All right. So now we go to the next Mishnah, and the Mishnah tells us the financial penalties for a man or a woman who rebels and fails to fulfill his or her marital obligation. So Hamorenis al Bala, if a woman rebels against her husband, Pochas in la miksubasa shiva dinarim b'Shabbos. Every week, we take away from her 7 dinars from her ksuva. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shiva Trapaikin, that we take away 7 of this Trapaikin, or Trapaik coin. Ad Masai Hupokes, until when? How long does it go down to 0 or what? Ad Keneged Ksubasa, until it goes down to 0, meaning that they can take it all away. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no, la'olam hu poches v'holik. It keeps on going. It doesn't just end at 0. She'im tipola Yerusha mimakom acher, because if she in fact has some inheritance, so gova hemena, he will be able to collect that inheritance from her. V'chein hamorid alishto. And similarly, when it comes to a man rebelling against his wife, mosivin al ksubasa shlosho dinarim b'Shabbos. Every Shabbos he has to add 3 dinars. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shlosha Trapaikin, it's 3 Trapaikin. Now, Tosos asks the question, what's the story with the 7 and the 3? And he cites a Yerushalmi. And the Yerushalmi explains that we had said that there are 7 obligations that a woman has to her husband, and that there are 3 obligations that a man has to his wife. And so the 7 and the 3 correspond. And so we're going to see a different answer in our Gemara, but that's the answer that there exists in the Yerushalmi. So now the Gemara asks, what exactly are we talking about? What's the content of the rebellion? So Mored is Mimai. What's she rebelling against? Rav Huna Omer Mitashmi Shamita, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina Amar Mimulacha. So Rabbi Yossi says that it's from Rabbi Huna, says that it's from having marital relations, whereas Rabbi Yossi says no, it's from doing the work that she's obligated to do to help support the family. Tanan, we have a Mishnah, our Mishnah, which says B'chein hamorid al ishto, and similarly a man who rebels against his wife. So Bishlam Mitash Mishlachaye, that it makes sense to say that the rebellion that we're talking about is relating to marital relations, because that's an obligation that a man has to his wife. Elamanda Amar Malacha, but when it comes to one who says that it's Malacha, Mimishu Badla, does he have any work that he has to do for her? Right? He has to do work in order to earn money, but he doesn't have to do work for her. And so yes, in fact, he does. And that in fact, the assumption that we had, that we were talking about work directly for the person, is not correct. Rather, Ba'omer Eini Zan Ba'eini Mefarnis. If he were to try to say, I don't want to support you, I don't want to give you money or food, that would be a case where he has to work for her. Ba'amar Rav Ha'omer Eini Zan Ba'eini Mefarnis Yotzi V'yitin Ksuba. Well, one second. If the guy actually says that I don't want to work for you, she gets divorced right away and she goes out with her ksuba. So what's the point of this Mishnah? Meaning, if in fact his statement to that effect causes him to have to divorce her right away, why do we need any kind of penalty? He just needs to divorce her. So the Gemara answers, boy. No, the fact is that we first want to ask him what's going on. We want to talk to him. We want to try and get him to come back and say, and not do this. And so the point is that the first step of this process is not to immediately go to the resolution, but rather to try and work things out. So Tosos here notes that this, citing Rabbeinu Eliyahu, if you take a look at the second to last Tosos on the page, we'll just read the first 2 lines. Mikan mochiach Rabbeinu Eliyahu. From this Gemara, the Rabbeinu Eliyahu learns shechayev adam lahaskir atzmo lilamed tinokos o laasos malacha acheres kedei lezon es ishto. That a man is obligated to go get a job. He has to work, hire himself out, even if it's just as a teacher or as or to do some other work, in order to make sure that his family has food. De'im lokain ma inyan zeh etzel moed mimulacha. That's the only way you can understand what this whole topic is of saying that this constitutes a moed mimulacha. So in any event, so now the Gemara asks the following: Meisvei. So again, we're trying to see whether we can prove one direction or the other, whether Rav Huna is right that we're talking about rebelling about marital relations, or are we talking about Rabbi Yossi that we're talking about work. So Meisvei. We have a brisa that's going to say that we're going to quote in full in a moment, but right now we're going to excerpt it. So Achas Li, it doesn't make a difference. The Beis Din is going to say to her, it doesn't make a difference what your relationship is to this man. Arusa unasua, whether you're an arusa, whether you've done only the first step of marriage, or nasua, or you've done both the kedushin and the chuppah. Va'afilu nida, even if you're a nida. Va'afilu chol, even if you're not well. Va'afilu shomeres yavam, even if you are a woman who is awaiting marriage to her yavam. In any of these cases, if you're rebelling, there's going to be a problem. Now, And we'll see exactly what that Brisa says about such a rebellious person. But now the Gemara is going to bring a challenge. Now, although these words are in parentheses, we'll read them, but you will see why they might be in parentheses, but they work well, so we can go through it in both directions. So Bishlam Lamanda Amar Mulacha Shapir, it makes sense if you want to say that this is that what the rebellion is about is it's about work, because El Lamanda Amar Mishtamish. But when but if you're saying that it's about marital relations, Nida Bas Tashmishi is a Nida somebody who can engage in marital relations? No, you don't have marital relations when your wife is a Nida. So Amar Lacha Enu Dama Misha Yeshlo Pas Basalo Lamisha Ainlo. No, the answer is that actually it does make a difference. Even a wife who is a Nida, if she says, I'm not going to have marital relations with you, that does have an impact on the husband, even while she's still a Nida, because he knows that, in fact, because again, the literal understanding is there's no difference. There's a big difference between somebody who's got bread in his basket and somebody who doesn't have bread in his basket. And the concept is simple. It's a lot easier. At least I find that at the end of a fast, when suddenly I'm now allowed to eat, I can keep going. I'm not that hungry. So that's the concept. So the point is that although he's prohibited to have marital relations with him, if she is saying, I'm not going to have marital relations with you ever, that's still going to be painful. Whereas, and insulting, yes, absolutely. Whereas if in fact he knows that she'll be able to have marital relations later, so that will be an easier thing for him to bear. Okay, so that's one way that we can understand from this brisa a challenge. But Ika da Amri, there are those who bring the challenge as follows. It makes sense. The one who says that we're talking about marital relations, because even somebody who is not feeling well can still engage in marital relations. Can a person who is feeling sick do work? Meaning, can she do the work that she needs to do for him? If she's feeling sick, she's not able to. So as a result, we need to revisit the entire machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Yossi, the son of Rav Chini. That in fact, the argument is as follows. Everybody agrees that when it comes to Tashmish, if she says no, that's kuli alma lo pligi dahavi mores. Everybody agrees that would be a rebellion. Ki pligi mi malacha. What they argue about is whether or not malacha also constitutes a rebellion. Mar savar malacha lo havi maredes. That when it came to Rav Huna, who says only marital relations, he says that rebelling about work is not considered rebellion. Umar savar malacha nami havi maredes. And the other one says no, it is that also is considered a rebellion. Okay. So now that we reference this brisa that we asked the question, we're going to go through the brisa. So gufa hamoredes al bala. If you have a woman who rebels against her husband, we deduct 7 dinarim every week. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shiva trapakikin, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's 7 trapakikin. So Rabbi Seinu chazru v'nimnu. So then they voted again, and they said, you know what? Rather than just a weekly deduction, we're going to make an announcement every week for 4 weeks that this woman is rebellious. The Shulchan Law Basin, and the Basin is going to send her messages. And what are they going to say? Even if your ksuba is worth 100 mana, meaning more, well over the regular 2 mana that we're talking about, 100 mana, you're going to lose it all. Akas li doesn't make a difference whether it's arusa nesua, afilu nida, afilu chola, afilu shomeres yavam. In all those cases, it doesn't make a difference what your relationship is. If you are rebelling, you're going to lose your ksuba. So Amar. So now that we've taught this entire brisa, so Amar le Rabbi Chia bar Yosef l'Shmuel. So now we're going to see why the Gemara may have deleted, according to some, and put in parentheses the earlier discussion, because Rav Chia Bar Yosef is going to ask the same question. Nida bas tashmishi, is a nida someone who's fit for marital relations? So Amralei, eno dama mishi yesh lo pas basal, mishi ein do pas basal. There's a big difference between one who has bread in his basket and one who doesn't have bread in his basket. So Amar Rabbi Chaba, Amarami Bar Chama. So Rabbi Bar Chama says, Ein machurizin Allah ela bevate kinesios uvate midrashas. That we don't actually go out to the street to make this announcement. We just make this announcement in shul and at the Beit Midrash. Amar Rava, I'm not sure that that's much better, but in any event, Amar Rava, what? No, they just make the announcement about her in the Beit Midrash.
Whether she's there or not.
Whether she's there or not.
Oh.
No. There's two different things. One is sending her a message that that this is true, and that's that language. And then the second is to make an announcement about her. So Amarava Daikanami, you can actually infer this from the Brisa, the Katani Arba Shabbasos Zoach Zo, that the reference to 4 Shabbatot, it could mean 4 weeks, 4 consecutive weeks, meaning it could be any day of the week. But in fact, we're saying that it's 4 Shabbatot, it's 4 Sabbaths. So Shema Mina, and first of all, by the way, it makes a lot of sense to say that if we're talking about marital relations, this makes a lot of sense, because when are you supposed to have marital relations if you're talking about Talmud Chacham? So then you're supposed to have marital relations on Friday night. So if you make the announcements on Shabbos day, so you're basically saying, last night you rebelled. So Rami, not that I would want that to happen to anybody, but in any event, Rami Bar Chama. So Rami Bar Chama says, in addition, Hamayim Sholchin Lama Basin. They would send her a message from Basin twice. Achas Kodem HaChachraza, once before the announcements, but Achas La'achar HaChachraza, and the once after the announcement. And the idea here is that they would do all this, and then after 4 weeks of this whole thing happening, if she's still rebelling, so she would lose her entire ksuba. So Darish Rav Nachman Bar Chisda, Rav Nachman Bar Chisda says halacha k'Rabbeinu, that in fact the halacha is like this group of rabbis who said that in fact after 4 weeks she loses her entire ksuba, and that it's not this progression. But Amar Rava, hi Borcha, that's not right. Amar Lei Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, my Borchate. Why is it wrong? So Anna Amrisa Nihale, I got this rule myself. And I heard it in and I told it in the name of a person who's a great person. So Umanu, and who was that? Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. It was Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. The EU command suver. So who did Rava think like? So Ki Hada Itmar, as it says the following: Rava Amar Rav Sheshes. Rava said in the name of Rav Sheshes, Halacha Nimlachan Ba, that the halacha is that we have a conversation with her, meaning that it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4 done, but rather we have to go back and say to her and try and convince her, and we use the gradual process that our Mishnah has rather than the lump sum approach that the Baraisa suggests. But Rav Huna Bar Yehuda Amar Rav Sheshes. However, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehuda, said in the name of Rav Sheshes that the halacha ain't imlachan, but that in fact the halacha is not like that. So Heiki Damya Mored. So now that we have this back and forth, it seems, by the way, that the halacha is like Rava and our Mishnah. That in fact it's done in the slow process, not the quick process. But in any event, now we're going to now that we've done all that, we're going to qualify what our rebellion is, meaning what is it that she's specifically saying? How we had earlier, what was the content of the rebellion? Now we're going to, what's the framing of the rebellion? So Amar Amar says, "De Amra beina le umitzarna le." I want him, but I want to cause pain to him. So that is the meaning of rebellion, meaning she does not want to get divorced. She is just very angry with him. And so as a result, she wants him to suffer. So, aval amra misalai al kafinan la. But if in fact she says, I just find this guy repulsive, I don't want to stay married to him, so then we don't force her. Now Rashi here says, we don't lo kaifinin la lahashavosa to stay with him. Ella no saying la get. Rather, he needs to give her a get, the yotza below ksuba, and she goes out without a ksuba. So, in fact, they would not stay together. But Mar Zutra disagrees. Kaifina, he says no. That even if she wants to, we don't want him. The issue is that we don't want her to say, well, I'm interested in this other guy, and so I now find this my first husband repulsive. And so, as a result, in order to discourage that, we say. Mar Zutra says no, we keep them together. On the other hand, the first opinion, a Maimar, says no. Look, well, she's going to give up her entire ksuba. So if she's willing to give up her entire ksuba, that's that. Let's just set her free. So, in any event, Hava Uvda, there was a story, there was a happening. Va'achpa Mar Zutra, and Mar Zutra forced the woman to stick around. Unafak mine Rabbi Chanina Misura, and Rabbi Chanina, a great rabbi, came of Surah, ended up coming from that relationship. So that seems to be a proof in favor of Mar Zutra. Velohi, but in fact, you don't need to say, we won't say that story supports Mar Zutra. Rather, Hasam Siyata Dishmaya Hava. We're going to say that in fact, that is just Hashem being kind and generous, Hashem providing assistance. And so as a result, we're not going to learn from this statement. So tomorrow, God willing, we will turn to the question of whether the rebellious wife loses not only her ketubah, which we said absolutely she would lose her ketubah, but whether she might lose even the assets that she brings into the marriage. And so for that, stay tuned tomorrow. So looking forward to our learning together tomorrow, and God willing, we will continue. Hopefully the weather will be better. So tomorrow we'll again be here, and same with Friday, and then next week we will be only over Zoom.
Thank you.
Have a great day.